208 million people bought online because the algorithms on all the platforms were the best ever. $1 extra billion of revenue. I know that because my companies were part of that success.
Revenue does not
$1 billion
mean
more.
money saved, though.
And also, you can cherry pick one economic stat, but the fact is, inflation has gone up since Trump took office. Unemployment has gone up since Trump took office. A lot of the macroeconomic indicators that people rely on aren't doing too well. So yeah, you can cherry pick small things like this has gone down, but when you walk to the grocery store, beef is
cherry pick this. We're 40 points off an all-time high in history on the S&P 500.
We do
the
this
number one economy on earth. Are you kidding?
It's growing at a slower rate than it did under Biden.
We're number one on earth, and we're 4 points off the high.
In today's video, Adam Mockler destroys Kevin O'Leary on CNN's NewsNight with Abby Phillip as the debate instantly erupts into one of the most intense exchanges we've seen yet. Adam Mockler calls out Kevin O'Leary's defense of Donald Trump's monarch-style power grabs, exposes the contradictions behind justifying US military strikes on drug trafficking boats, and breaks down how extremist rhetoric has fueled real-world chaos, from election lies to domestic threats. And when Kevin O'Leary tries to deflect, Adam Mockler pulls it right back to facts, accountability, and constitutional reality, leaving Kevin O'Leary stumbling for solid ground. So let's dive in and watch how Adam Mockler shuts down Kevin O'Leary on CNN's NewsNight with Abby Phillip.
One of the
designated terrorist group.
One of the administration's primary arguments was that these boats were an imminent threat to the United States.
They are. They're killing 5,000 Americans a month.
They're not headed to the United States.
The drugs are killing 5,000 Americans a month.
Also, I want to pose this question. So the Coast Guard said earlier that 212 ships were intercepted with no deaths. That means we do have the ability to do this. 25% of those ships had no drugs. Are you okay with striking boats with no drugs?
Listen, the Coast Guard is patrolling off the coast of the United States.
Are you okay with a 25% chance?
Wait. That's not a 25% chance off the coast of Venezuela. They know for certain that these drugs are on these ships.
We have intercepted over 200 boats with no violence whatsoever. We have the ability to do this. We are committing violence because of
losing 60,000 Americans a year.
And that's awful. And that's awful.
Of course. We're not intercepting these boats enough, obviously.
But they're not even coming to our country.
Says who?
The Admiral.
No, he said it was going to a boat off the coast that they never found. But they're not saying that on all these ships out there.
So can we justify striking a boat that's going to any country because eventually they may become a secondary country where drugs go in the United States? What's the barrier here? How do you justify
the justification is that they're a terrorist organization and they've been designated as such, and we can take them out just like Obama did with hundreds of strikes all around the world.
Just because Obama did it doesn't make it right either.
Well, but the Democrats back then didn't seem to mind.
There was an authorized use of military force for Obama. He actually had one. You can argue whether or not it was right or moral or legal when it comes to the American citizen, but he had authorization to operate in that area.
No one here is defending drugs coming into the country, but can I ask the conservatives on this panel, if I were to tell you that this puts U.S. troops at risk because we're lowering the rules, we're lowering the bar of engagement for other countries, and they can therefore use our strikes as a pretext to kill U.S. troops, would you say that maybe we should
if our troops are sending drugs somewhere, I don't think that's happening. But the American people support
I don't think they're going to use that standard.
They don't have to prove that.
I don't think they're going to use that standard.
I want to just point out what you were talking about, though, and saying I think there's this conflation of argument that folks do when they don't actually really want to have to defend the actions that this administration is doing. And it is saying that people who question the actions of doing one strike and then potentially doing a second strike for people who might have been surrendering or pleading for help, that because we have the courage to ask the question, we want Americans to die from drugs. No. If you live in America, you've probably known someone that has had an overdose, or a family member that has had an overdose, or a family member that is incarcerated because of drugs. So to conflate those arguments is intellectually lazy, and I think we need to do a better
Adam Mockler and Ashley Allison are pushing for clarity, while Hal Lambert keeps stretching the justification. One thing that never gets mentioned by the right in debates like this is that the DEA itself has said repeatedly that most fentanyl entering the US comes through legal ports of entry carried by US citizens, not from random boats off the Venezuelan coast. That's not speculation, that's from multiple DEA threat assessments. If the actual pipeline isn't coming from these offshore vessels, then it reinforces exactly why Adam and Ashley are pressing for accountability. The strategy simply doesn't match the data, and when it comes to striking vessels preemptively, international law isn't on Hal Lambert's side either. Under the law of armed conflict, lethal force requires imminent threat, not hypothetical future danger that might show up in another country. That's why military and diplomatic experts have warned that lowering engagement standards can boomerang back onto US troops. Russia and China have already cited US precedent before when justifying their own aggressive actions. They absolutely would use looser standards as political cover. Plus, the Coast Guard's own record of thousands of non-lethal interdictions shows there are safer, proven methods. Adam and Ashley aren't defending drug traffickers. They're defending constitutional limits, international norms, and the safety of US service members. What they're calling out is the dangerous logic that anything goes, as long as the intention sounds tough. And honestly, that's exactly how bad policy gets normalized.
Tonight, a twist in the cracked cold case. Sources tell CNN that the man suspected of planting pipe bombs the day before the January 6 riots told investigators that he believed the 2020 election was stolen. D.C. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro was asked about that today.
He was disappointed in various aspects of the election, but this guy was an equal opportunity bomber. He put a bomb outside the Republican National Committee and the Democrat National Committee. He was disappointed to a great deal in the system, both sides of the system. And for me as a prosecutor, my job is to prove what his intent was in placing those pipe bombs and what he intended to do and what we can prove. And we can prove that.
I don't think the motivation makes any sense. It's clearly a distraught, I mean, the poor guy, he's got to be mentally ill. He's blowing pipe bombs. Remember the Boston bomber? It was horrific what happened there. It's a form of mental illness to do this to people, but you want the FBI to win. Even if you don't like them, you want them to win. And in this case, I think they're winning.
You said this was essentially a tragedy of a mental illness, and I absolutely agree. But my problem is that a lot of very impressionable Americans who were distraught around this time were taken advantage of by a president who was using incendiary rhetoric. Before the election even happened, he said it was going to be stolen. He took the stage on election night before the votes were counted and said, the election is stolen from me. Mike Pence took the stage after and kind of walked it back. He then tried to place fake slates of electors, tried January 6th. The president's rhetoric directly led to impressionable Americans thinking the election was stolen and committing heinous acts like tasing cops in the neck.
But he wants to blow up both sides.
Can I put a different theory potentially on this? This guy's clearly warped in his head. He gets arrested. He realizes, well, the Trump DOJ is in charge. President Trump is the president of the United States. Maybe if I tell them it was because I thought the election was stolen, they'll take it easy on me. In his warped mind.
You sound like Dan Bongino.
No, but I mean, I'm just saying, like, he put bombs on both sides.
But are you saying
so
that?
now all of a sudden he's a truth guy and everybody should believe what he says?
No, maybe he put a bomb at the DNC because he believed the Democrats stole the election because Republicans and conspiracy theorists pushed that, and he put the bomb at the RNC because the vice president who was about to be sworn in was going to ride by that area.
There is a massive cover-up because the person who planted those pipe bombs, they don't want you to know who it was because it's either a connected anti-Trump insider or this was an inside job. This was a setup. I have zero doubt.
Folks, you're not going to walk into our capital city, put down 2 explosive devices, and walk off in the sunset. Not going to happen. We were going to track this person to the end of the earth. There was no way he was getting away.
There's not really been any factual information laid out about this case just yet. And when we do, I don't know, some people still might not believe it.
Yeah, there's this treadmill of conspiracy theories that people run on where there's always, it's like whack-a-mole. There's always a new conspiracy theory to pop down. But I think Dan Bongino's rhetoric, his conspiracy rhetoric, proves my point so perfectly about this MAGA ecosystem. So Trump told incendiary lies about an election that were proven wrong in 60 different courts. And then Dan Bongino has to run down the treadmill and find a different theory that actually this was like an inside job with Democrats doing this. I don't know. So there's always some excuse. And what do you think impressionable Americans who may have mental illness or may be distraught or have economic trouble, how do you think they respond to being gaslit by people in power, like the president, like Dan Bongino? These are lies being told to the American people.
Aren't you happy the man has been at least
Yes,
found?
of course.
Watching this exchange, it's clear why Adam Mockler keeps grounding the debate in actual evidence, while Kevin O'Leary and Hal Lambert drift into speculation and conspiracy comfort zones. One thing that never gets acknowledged by the right here is that the DOJ, DHS, and every federal judge who heard a 2020 election case, more than 60 rulings, found no credible evidence of widespread fraud. That matters because when powerful people keep pushing narratives that courts and investigators have already debunked, it directly fuels the environment that makes unstable individuals more likely to act out violently. And on the pipe bomb case specifically, the idea that there's no way someone could get away ignores reality. The FBI still has dozens of unresolved domestic terrorism cases, including the Nashville bomber and multiple extremist attacks where suspects died or disappeared before identification. Counterterrorism experts point out that gaps in surveillance coverage, outdated camera systems, and January 6th crowd chaos created the perfect storm for a suspect to slip away, not some secret political cover-up. What Adam is pointing toward is a pattern. Conspiracy influencers constantly shift the goalposts. When facts contradict them, they invent a new theory. Political scientists call this cascading disinformation, and it's been shown to push already vulnerable people deeper into radicalization. And that's the real danger. Not one mentally ill individual, but an entire ecosystem that repeatedly replaces truth with whatever keeps the outrage machine running.
You're a young person. I think a lot of people of your generation probably don't even think there's going to be a Social Security around when it's time to retire. When you hear things like this and you see what other countries are doing and for forcing the issue, because in Australia it's mandatory. Every person gets this account created. Do you think it's a good idea?
It's not the worst idea I've heard. It kind of reminded me of the $1,000 baby accounts where it's like, this is actually something that it's feasible, it's good. But I just think right now we have more pressing issues than reorganizing the entire way Social Security and the economy works. Young people across the United States are having trouble accumulating capital, especially young people. We're having trouble accumulating capital in the form of housing or in the form of investing. And due to that, actually most of the times we're negative in capital due to student debt or medical debt. Due to that, you see a lot of younger people like Gen Zers or millennials turning against the system. Like, we're not loyal to a system that hasn't been loyal to Gen Zers thus far. So when a lot of conservatives talk about Zohran Mamdani or young people being super disenfranchised and disillusioned, being socialist, it's actually really explainable by just looking at the way the system has worked for young people, or that hasn't worked for young people.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Cyber Monday, 208 million people bought online because the algorithms on all the platforms were the best ever. $1 extra billion of revenue. I know that because my companies were part of that success.
Revenue does not
$1 billion
mean
more.
money saved, though.
And also, you can cherry pick one economic stat, but the fact is, inflation has gone up since Trump took office. Unemployment has gone up since Trump took office. A lot of the macroeconomic indicators that people rely on aren't doing too well. So yeah, you can cherry pick small things like this has gone down, but when you walk to the grocery store,
okay,
beef is
cherry pick this. We're 40 points off an all-time high in history on the S&P 500.
We do
the
this
number one economy on earth. Are you kidding?
It's growing at a slower rate than it did under Biden.
We're number one on earth, and we're 40 points off the high.
Who's benefiting in that number one? I think it's
you are. Everybody that's retired.
This exchange really shows the huge disconnect between Kevin O'Leary's investment class worldview and what younger Americans are actually dealing with. Kevin keeps pointing to the stock market as if it's the universal indicator of economic health, but that ignores the reality that over 50% of Gen Z and younger millennials don't own a single share of stock outside of a retirement plan, and many don't even have that. So when Kevin brags about the S&P being near record highs, that's great for retirees and wealthy investors, but it does nothing for people who are drowning in debt and can't afford basic milestones like housing. And when Adam talks about younger generations feeling disconnected from the system, there's real data behind that. The Federal Reserve reports that today's young adults have 35% less wealth than previous generations did at the same age. Home prices adjusted for wages are the least affordable they've been since the 1980s. Student debt has tripled since the early 2000s. Medical debt is now the #1 source of personal bankruptcy. None of that is mindset. It's math. Even the strong economy argument Kevin leans on misses critical nuance. Yes, the overall economy is large, but wealth concentration is the highest it's been in US history, with the top 1% holding more wealth than the entire middle class combined. That's why younger people aren't buying the narrative that everything is great. They're living in a completely different economy than Kevin is describing. Kevin's numbers tell one story, lived reality tells another, Adam's pointing to the latter. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.